So I want to go to some broader points, God willing. Good morning, gentlemen. I want to go with some broader points. Some of this we've touched on, I think most of it not. But it's just sort of a compilation of what I think are important ideas related to the Chag, and we'll talk about them. So we have the perspective that Hashem looked into the Torah and created the world, right? This perspective is what becomes what we use to frame our approach to everything, right? But we're going to talk about it in one context. HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and then created the world. So he wrote the Torah, so to speak, or the key elements of it were already articulated before anything was brought into creation. Okay? Kadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and then created the world. Okay.
I got a question. I got a question with that. If Hashem, if the Torah was written first and he looked into it and then created the world, would that not mean that some of the things that took place that are recorded in the Torah were predetermined and the free will and choice wasn't there?
Right.
If you're saying everything was, you know what I mean?
So when we say that the Torah was looked into, we're not, and was written before, I'm sorry, we're not saying that the experiences of Abraham Avinu's life were looked into before. We're saying that Abraham Avinu would be tested, or somebody like him who had reached his point would be tested to an extreme.
So the broader outline of the messages and what we're supposed to learn from it was written.
The beginning point to the end point, day one to the last minute on day 6 in year 6,000 would have been generally articulated with certain key milestone points listed. One of the milestone points that we believe is listed is the Jewish holidays. We believe that the Jewish holidays weren't triggered by the events that are tied to them. The Jewish holidays are cornerstones in time that the Jewish people must experience each and every year for the 6,000-year period until the time of Mashiach, in order to refine and build the Jewish people from where they start to where they must end up. So therefore, if we say that the holidays are cornerstones, it brings some very, very interesting applications. One is that the holidays are not commemorative. We don't have the holiday of Pesach to commemorate leaving Egypt. We have the holiday of Pesach because we've got to grow in terms of the points that are articulated by what we're tethering this to. So Pesach is not a commemoration, for example, of what was. It's a call to action right now. And that means, and we've talked about this, some of us have talked about this, that means that I have to be able to quantify growth in me as a result of having the privilege to experience an additional Pesach. If I'm commemorating what happened X thousands of years ago, then it's passive. Then it's a function of memory in the Western sense. If Pesach is calling me out and saying, you're alive now for this present day Pesach, Passover, here are the demands on you, and the mitzvot of the holiday are the way to meet those demands and excel. So that's what
much different. That's a much different experience.
Completely different.
Yeah, that's a better experience. That's a better experience. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, the holidays today are benign for most people. They're just benign. They're points of commemoration.
But if you're reading daily, right? If you're studying daily, and I assume that all the reading that you do before the holidays prepares you to be the way you're just talking about.
Beautiful, Mark. Beautiful.
Right.
And that's why we say that you're supposed to study the laws of the holiday 30 days before the holiday. Right. Yeah. But what were you going to say?
No, nothing.
So
I understand
now, if you go one step over to the rabbinic holidays, excuse me 1 second.
I just saw something today, guys, that $100 million donation was withdrawn from Penn.
Yeah, I saw that.
So that-
There's more coming.
I'm sure.
I'd be curious to see, there are a few people in the community who went to Wharton.
Oh, yeah.
Very wealthy people. I'd be curious if they're doing the same thing. I hope they are.
I would hope so.
And to Columbia and to Harvard.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Those three leaders of those schools should be really, it's so embarrassing.
Yeah.
It's shameful. Sorry, Rabbi.
So the extension of that is that when the rabbis decide to declare a holiday, that shakes the universe. Because if we're saying that God established the holidays before and then created everything, right? Knowing that the holidays were benchmarks for significant individual and collective growth, when the rabbis decide to establish a holiday, that's a massive act. And it's no wonder, with that in mind, that we say that the two holidays that the rabbis established will never go away, will never be downplayed, whereas the biblical holidays will. Because the biblical holidays will be downplayed because we've used what they give us to grow to what we need to be over that spectrum of time. But the rabbinic holidays, where the rabbi stepped into the process and said, wait a minute, there's a major gap here, those may or may not be satisfied at the end of time, as we call it. So Hanukkah and Purim, we hold, don't go away at all. And the other side of that is that the consideration that the rabbis took to establish these holidays is earth-shattering. How dare they? How dare they? All right, you're messing with the most important elements of God's vision.
What's your opinion then, Rabbi? Should the rabbis make holidays or not?
Of course they did. We know that they made.
I'm talking about moving. No, now in modern time, I'm talking about. If they could do it back then, why can't they do it now? And if they did it,
we can't do it now because we don't have the rabbinic platform to do it. We don't have we don't have the great assembly. Okay, we don't have the great assembly now. We don't have what we call the Sanhedrin. We don't have the infrastructure yet, the Jewish law infrastructure and the judicial infrastructure to adjudicate this issue today. So will we in the future? We believe we will. We believe that the Sanhedrin will come back when the temple comes back and when the Jewish people are focused again primarily in the land of Israel. Then the Sanhedrin, the great Jewish court, will come back and they will have the power, should they choose to establish more holidays. Now, the fact that over the course of a couple of thousand years, the rabbis established two holidays, it's a very big deal because we know that they mandated the Jewish people to engage X days of their lives completely differently than otherwise and took massive liberties in deciding that. If we decide that we're going to light candles for 8 days, that's a very big deal. We're going to say Hallel for 8 days. We're going to say Al Nisim, we're going to add Al Nisim into the prayer. These are very big deals. So we start with God looked into the world, God looked into the Torah and created the world. What did he establish in the Torah? To Abe's point, he didn't establish every narrative. He established the key milestone points that were essential from his perspective in order to bring humanity and each individual from point A to point Z. And the holidays are cornerstones of that. And therefore, a holiday is not a commemorative event. It's a call to action, and people have to move, and people have to build, and people have to change as a result of the holiday. So if you said Shehayanu last night, which God willing we all did, thank you, God, for giving me life at this point and the opportunity to experience this. And you end up at the end of the 8 days not having been changed by the pounding messages of the holiday, then something was missed. Good? Now, step over. And now when you say that the rabbis could have declared a zillion holidays, good and otherwise, we had a lot of battles. We had many, many, many miraculous events throughout the last couple of thousand years. You do it. You read the books of any given community, they'll tell you, including ours, they'll say, this was a day when the Arabs rioted, for example, and they started burning X, and they killed people, and this, that, and there was a miraculous X that saved us. Right? Every community has that. The rabbis didn't declare holidays for those. They declared these. So the impact and the importance of these holidays can't be overstated. Okay, so that's the platform. Good.
Can I ask a question? Is the common denominator between Purim and Hanukkah in that it really was an internal difficulty and struggle and battle within the Jewish spirituality that was overcome, rather than overcoming an external force or attack or danger?
Well, what would you say? You tell me. You tell me what the difference is.
I would say so, because I would say that, during Purim, of course, there was the outside external threat was Haman and the destruction of the Jews, but perhaps there was an interpretation that the Jews were becoming very comfortable going to Achashverosh's parties and maybe losing their language and losing a lot of their religion and all that. And, miraculously, because of that external threat, internally they unified and got back to Judaism. And that's a common denominator with Hanukkah. Yes, there was an external threat, physical danger, but the real danger was the spiritual internal civil war that was overcome.
Excellent. So it always ties back to the spiritual deterioration. It always does. It always does. So the question is, how come in Hanukkah, the spiritual and Purim, the spiritual deterioration led to the threat of physical annihilation, and in Hanukkah, the spiritual deterioration led to the threat of an absolute existential disappearance, where Torah would have disappeared completely. So we have to relegate each of those and understand why one, in our case, Hanukkah we're holding, was maybe more catastrophic than Purim. How could you say that? Well, Purim, he was going to wipe out all the Jews in most of the world. Doesn't get much worse than that, right? That was a Achashverosh and Haman's plan. But in terms of Hanukkah, there wouldn't have been any more Judaism anyway. It would have been finished. It was very close to being finished. And had this perspective grown a little more pervasive, the whatever flickering possibilities of the oral law would have been completely extinguished. And that would have been that. That would have been the end of it. We can talk more about what happened, but that's what we came to. We came very close to that. There's a perspective that's brought. We talked about it in the context of learning and in Chumash, but it's important to note here as well. We learned, some of us learned, that b'lev kol chacham lev natati chokhmah, which means that in the heart of everyone who has wisdom in his heart, I will give wisdom. Anybody remember that when we learned it? I don't know if you guys did. I think we maybe
That's a Levy question.
Ubelev kol chacham lev natati chokhmah. In the heart of all of those, Zach, you remember? Manoah, you remember? In the heart of all of those who have wisdom in their heart, I will give wisdom.
Is that the idea of the bump up?
That's the idea of the bump. Beautiful. So this phrase is written, this verse, portion of a verse, is written a little less than 30 times in the context of Bezalel, who was the architect and designer, or the implementer. God was the designer, the implementer of the tabernacle. And it speaks to the fact that the fact was that they had just gotten out of Egypt and there were no artisans and there were no craftsmen. They were all slaves. They were all very, very low-end laborers. So God calls out Bezalel as someone with a flickering ability, and he tells him, engage your kohot, engage what you believe your strengths are, and I will enable it. I'll bless it. Ubelev kol chacham lev, in the heart of everyone who has wisdom in his heart, or hers, I will give wisdom. So like we said, Abe, in terms of the bump, if you learn this much, God will give you a bump. You learn this much, God will give you a bump. Now, we bring this pasuk back, we bring this section of the pasuk back in the context of Hanukkah. Our rabbis quote it as well, because they say as follows. They tie it to another important axiom, which is Kol hashoneh halachot b'chol yom muftach lo shehu ben olam haba, ben haolam haba. Kol hashoneh halachot b'chol yom, who's ever learning Torah every day, is guaranteed a place in the world to come.
Oh, that's in your morning prayers.
That's right.
Line.
Fantastic. Yeah. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So tie the two pieces together and tell me how one relates to the other one.
Are you asking me?
Why does one relate to the other? How does one relate to the other? Yeah.
I have to think about that a second. Maybe you can answer that.
No.
No, in the morning prayers, he who studies halakha, right? Am I pronouncing it right?
Yeah.
That person is going to have to be blessed in the afterlife.
So we're saying yes, good, and go one step further. We're saying guaranteed a place in the afterlife, right?
Right. So it's no different than if you're learning every day. You just keep climbing and climbing and climbing every single day, getting closer to reaching. You're never going to reach the pinnacle, but you always got to striving for it. And if you do that, you are getting closer. You know, when you leave this planet, I mean, when you leave your body, your soul will be able to go up there.
Beautiful. No. So I wanted to take it one step further. It's guaranteed to him, right? It's committed to him. Our rabbis make an interesting point, Mark, to go on what you're saying. The rabbis say that he already bought it. He already owns it. or she. In other words, the person who's learning every day, their life is completely different. They've already defined a greater than physical reality. They don't live here. They already live here and there. He's been Olam Haba already. He's in that a club already. So it's a guarantee. You locked it in. Everybody is given the opportunity, right? We say we quote, some of us learned it together, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba. Everybody has a potential piece. Now we're saying muftach lo. He's already in it. That's what we're talking about here. So, Mark, we're going to take what you said one step further. The fact is that when God says, I'm gonna give a jump, I'm gonna charge, I'm gonna elevate your learning, and if you put in 2 hours, you're gonna get 2.5 hours worth of value. What that speaks to, according to this perspective, is because the person already stepped outside of the constructs of the physical because of his learning, and he's already in a zone where it's open, where the ability to amass is boundless. So 2 hours of learning doesn't equal 2 hours of knowledge. 2 hours of learning in a boundless platform could give me whatever amount of knowledge.
Right. That makes sense.
It's a beautiful idea. The
That makes
idea
sense.
is I'm not on a tit for tat plus. The tit for tat plus, I put an X, I get Y, is something very well and logically defined in a practical perspective. I step out of that, I'm in another place, another reality. I'm not bound by that. And I can really draw from a remarkable spectrum of knowledge. Right? Like I was
100%.
talking to somebody,
100%. It makes total
Right.
sense. You could be 10 minutes of learning, and you get one thing out of that, and that one thing could be a life-changing thought or experience, or
it
you could help.
is, and it gives you a permanent reality, Mark. That your permanent reality is not where it was anymore. You're walking around here, but you're not really fully here. Our rabbis say a fascinating thing in this context, and we learned this together. Right? We're very familiar with this, right? The ladder was poised in the ground, and it broke through to the heavens, and Yaakov is lying at the base of it, and he sees the angels going up and coming down. The Gemara in Masechet Chulin brings down a fascinating idea here. It says, Olim umistaklim b'dikono shomala, ve'olim umistaklim b'dikono shel mata. He says that the rabbis went up, they're not the rabbis, excuse me, the angels went up and got to see the images of the heavenly world, and they went up and got to see the images of the practical physical world. What does that mean?
It means I want to be an angel someday.
You're better than an angel. You can do stuff. What does it mean? They were able to go up to the super what do you call it, world, super spiritual world, and see what the super spiritual world has in it. And they were able to go up to the super spiritual world and see the physical elements in it.
The physical
makes sense.
Did you say to see the physical elements in the spiritual world, or the physical elements of the world below.
They were able to go up and see the physical elements as they reside in that spiritual place. Dikuno shel mata. They were able to see the physical elements as they reside in the spiritual place. How does that make sense?
But makes sense because
So how?
if person goes up or person gets more religious and they get more spiritual, then they see things, they see people differently, and they can see both the physical part of them, and you can possibly, you can see if a person is spiritual or not, right?
Good, beautiful. Yes. So what did the angels see when they were going up and down? What did they see up there?
As far as looking down or looking up?
They looked up and they saw physical. How does that work?
Does this tie back to what you said the other day, that we're not physical people bringing spirituality into the world? We're spiritual people
Right.
living in a physical world.
Excellent, beautiful. That's
Right.
exactly right. Beautiful, Abe. So now take it to the next step. If we're spiritual beings acting in a physical platform, then what did the angels see?
I'm
That's a good one.
I'm a
I'm
little
lost there.
stumped on that one.
Yeah.
And so it appears that when we say "Umistaklim b'dikuno shel mata," that they were able to see earthly images up there, which really, as we've talked about, we say that there is no thick line between one or the other. We've said that many times, right? It's porous at most, if it's anything. And now we see that when we said that if a person is learning every day, HaKadosh Baruch Hu compounds the learning, right? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the person is already in that place. In other words, it's not a place a person goes to, it seems. It's a place that a person is already inhabiting. So what the angels saw, they saw the earthly Jacob up there, in his up there. It's like a simulcast, right? They saw him here and there. And how does he achieve here and there while he's still in a physical body? Because he's engaging in the metaphysical stuff. So point being, when you're studying Torah here, you're not only creating a you for up there after 120 years, you're already inhabiting up there. The angels saw Yaakov up there as well as down here. They went to Lamala and they saw Dikuno shel mata. They were able to see the down here up there because it's manifested up there. It's moving. It's not only compiling.
So, like you said, we're already partially there already.
We are there already.
We are there already.
We're there. We're interacting up there already.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody or only people who learn?
Everybody has a spot, but what we're focused to here is the fact that the knowledge is the enabler. The knowledge is the enabler.
You get a better seat.
You get a better seat. You took the words out of my mouth.
You get a better seat. You're either in the in the bleachers,
upper deck,
or you're up front.
Right.
You either earn it for the future, or you're enjoying it now. Everybody has a place in it for the future.
But you do both.
Good. If you have this way of life, then you get both. Then you're enjoying it now and then. Okay. On that basis, the rabbis also tie the holiday of Hanukkah, and we're just going to touch on this a little bit. They tie it to the dream of the Sada Mashkim, of the butler, of Paro's butler. And they say that he saw a vine of grapes, and it had 3 branches. And I want to talk about this dream separately when we go back to the Chumash and talk more about dreams. So I just want to touch it here for a minute. But they say that there were the 3 branches that the butler articulated represent nefesh, ruach, neshama, spirit, will, and soul, or thought, speech, and action. So we know, because we learned it together, that the person is made up of the physical, the nefesh, which we've learned together, which is that composite of physical, spiritual, and then the all spiritual, the neshama. And we hold that the seichel, or the intellect, sits within all of that. And then we have the higher will. Now, rabbis say that what was compromised and what was beaten down in Hanukkah was this structure. And in fact, they say that the effort of the Hashmonaim enabled the reemergence of these areas as defined, and again, leave it on the side, I just wanted to tempt you with it, we'll talk about it more in depth, as happens to be defined in the dream of the butler, but again, we'll talk about that, but just make a mental note of it, remember it. In the context of Hanukkah, we say that the nefesh, ruach, and the neshama of the individual, the spirit, the soul, and the will were compromised and had to be reclaimed by the Hashmonaim. So when we say that this Hellenistic push was pervasive, it wasn't just an intellectual thing, that people intellectually moved away. It was something, according to this opinion, that seeped into everything, that colored everything, that put a big cloud over the core elements of the individual, particularly the Jewish individual, and shut the system down. And therefore, we needed an extraordinary effort by man and an extraordinary effort by God, which we're going to call man's sacrifice or miraculous effort, and God's miraculous effort to reclaim this constellation. The constellation, in its truest, deepest, most integrous sense, was compromised. It wasn't just the Hellenistic side of it. It had gotten to the core of the Jewish person, creating a separating between the core elements that enable the Jewish person to be in this up and down, back and forth, this world, next world at the same time thing. It went so deep and so far and was so powerful that the core structure was separating, was being pushed apart.
We got short-circuited.
It short-circuited, exactly. It short-circuited. So therefore, we needed the Jewish people to make teshuvah in order to grab hold of the tail of the structure before it was too far broken. And we needed God to do extraordinary efforts as well. So when we talk about the fact that the rabbis went ahead and made a holiday, and we say tons of berachot, we say the Hallel, full Hallel. We don't do that on the biblical holidays, right? How do we do it here? We have so many unique elements here, but when we look at it in a big way, in a way that speaks to the entire spectrum of the Jewish person and Jewish people, our entire reach, our capacity, the fact that we float in between these worlds and we habitate them at the same time, and the fact that there was such a dramatic and huge compromise of us that the whole system was shaken. Now we understand the job of Matitya and his family and what they needed to do. They needed to create a massive awakening. It's like somebody saying American Jewry is gone. And it is, it's gone. It's gone. This is the Hanukkah catastrophe 100-fold, because we're so many more people and we have so many more resources to not let it happen. It's the Hanukkah, it's the tragedy that could have been. It is the tragedy that could have been. So I want you to frame it in present day terms. This ain't something that was. This is something that is. And it's not about how they fixed it. It's about how we need to fix ourselves and maybe, possibly, reach out to others. Because it's no different. Were 80% of the people assimilated then? I don't know, maybe. Maybe. A little more, a little less, something like that. Was it a massive loss in terms of the Jewish dream? How do you throw away 80% of your children? How do you do something like that? That is, I believe, one of the very important messages of Hanukkah. And we need to understand it in its absolute catastrophic sense. We have the ability to be up here, down there, and up here. We have that ability. Everybody's got it. The person who's learning and doing and connected gets constant stipends that he monetizes immediately to further his learning and growth and positioning. And when it breaks down, the breakdown is it's Hanukkah until it happens. Good. So we have a lot to celebrate and we have a lot to do. That's the reality. Hanukkah is today, huh?
בימים ההם בזמן הזה.
That's right. בימים ההם
you say?
בזמן הזה. In those days, in our time. All right, gentlemen. I'm going to pause a little earlier today because we have the longer prayer. I'm going to get to shul now.
Okay.
Chag Sameach, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Beautiful, beautiful Shabbat Hanukkah for everybody.
You too.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.